Hello, chess fans. Welcome to another edition of Chess Chat, a program designed to give you, the viewer, a deeper understanding and appreciation of the wonderful and fascinating world of chess. I am your host, George Marigenian, Program Director of the area's Wachusett Chess Club. This club meets every Wednesday evening from 7 to 11 in room C-199 of the McKay Campus School at Fitchburg State College. And I welcome anybody who plays chess to come and visit the club on a Wednesday night and see how the club operates. If you're interested in improving your game of chess, that's the place to come on a Wednesday night. And with me today is a special co-host, Paul Giovino of Lunenburg, who is actually substituting for my regular co-host, Martin Lane of Lunenburg. And Paul Giovino is one of the strongest players in central Massachusetts. In fact, Paul just won the Wachusett Chess Club B Championship. He did it actually before. Actually, you've won it more than once.
Yes.
You've done it several times.
This is the second year.
Second year. And Paul actually is an up-and-coming player. And you're going to hear more about Paul Giovino as far as area chess. Well, Paul, today I decided we would honor an individual who was better known as an artist, an avant-garde artist. His name was Marcel Duchamp. He was certainly well known to people in the art world because he was considered one of the most influential artists of the 20th century.
Fascinating.
And, but what is not known is that Marcel Duchamp was an active chess player during the 1920s and 30s. In fact, actually, chess was a passion with him. He was obsessed by chess. And of the readings I've done on him, I'm convinced that actually, if he actually had done more success, had more success in chess tournaments, he may actually have given up the art as a profession and pursued chess as a profession. But of course, actually, he never attained really strong master strength. But he was able to hold his own against masters, and he beat quite a few. Now, Marcel Duchamp actually came from a family actually of brothers and sisters, his mother and father, who were immersed in art, music, and chess. They loved it. They actually learned at an early age that these were essential, activities to engage in and fulfill one's life. So we're going to present today a game that Marcel Duchamp played actually in 1929, June of 1929, in a tournament in Paris, and he defeated a very strong player, a player who was multi-time champion of Belgium. His name was George Koltanowski. And let me point out that Marcel was actually no slouch himself, because he played in the first World Amateur Chess Championship in 1924 in Paris. And there's a story behind this. In 1924, the Olympics, the regular Olympics, Summer Olympics, was held in Paris. And the Olympic organizers invited the chess players to become part of the Olympics. That was rather historic.
Wow, yeah.
Because they defined, the organizers of the Olympics back in 1924 defined chess as a sport. They said, we want chess in the Olympics. So the chess players actually participated in the Olympics, but the problem arose with the organizers found out discerning between who's an amateur chess player, who's a professional chess player. So even though there was a World Amateur Team Championship played in 1924, chess never was adopted in the Olympics thereafter, because there was always actually controversy as far as who's a professional, who's an amateur.
So it was just that 1 year then?
Just that 1 year. But Duchamp played in 1924 in that championship. He played in 4 French national championships. He played on the French national team 4 times from 1928 to 1932. And in 1932, he became actually the champion of Paris. He was that strong that he won the Paris championship. So he was a very active player. So in 1929, he's playing George Koltanowski in this tournament in Paris. And Koltanowski is white, and Koltanowski opened the game with d4. So let's play actually the move that Koltanowski played, d4. Okay, now, Paul, you look at this position. Can you tell me actually what are Black's choices against this d4?
Black has many different options here. You can continue with d5.
Okay, d5 is a possibility, a logical reply, mirroring, white's move. Okay, anything else actually which makes sense?
Knight to f6 is also a possibility.
Okay, and let's actually play that move now, because that's the move that actually Duchamp played in the game. So Black's first move was knight f6. Now what does this move do?
This move creates it hard for white to push e4.
Aha. So this development of the knight prevents white from putting another pawn in the center, e4.
It does.
Okay.
White could play knight to c3.
Okay.
Protecting that square.
And preparing actually knight
Preparing
c3.
e4.
Now prepares e4. Okay. Anything else which is possible besides knight c3?
Other possibilities include bishop to g5.
Okay, attacking the knight.
Attacking the knight.
That's a possibility. Anything else?
Another possibility is c4.
c4. And that was the move played. Koltanowski, on his second move, played c4. Okay, it's Black's turn, and Black actually, what can Black do here? Well, Black actually could move some pawns. He has to move pawns if he wants to try to get bishops out. So he could actually play, d6, that's a possibility.
D6, it allows that bishop.
Right. He could actually play g6 if he wishes to actually develop his bishop on g7 along the long diagonal, which we call a fianchetto, or fianchetto, as a lot of English speakers refer to it, that is placing the bishop along the long diagonal. But what Duchamp played on his second move was e6.
e6.
Okay, is that a good move?
It is. It allows the bishop on f8 a long diagonal.
Okay, so it opens up actually this diagonal for the bishop to come out.
Exactly.
Okay. Okay, so now it's White's move. It's Koltanowski's third move. What can he do?
White can continue with development knight to f3.
Okay, that looks like a good developing move. Anything else?
White can also continue with knight to c3.
And that's the move that was played by Koltanowski. He played knight c3. Now tell me, with knight c3, is there a threat that White has now?
White can now push e4 because it is protected, and Black's knight can no longer take that piece.
All right, so knight c3 supports the advance of the pawn to e4. Okay, it's Black's turn, and Black now can stop that. You know, if Black should realize that White's plan is to play e4. There are two ways to stop that. One way is to play the bishop on f8 and play it to b4.
Yeah, that creates a pin on the knight.
And the pin on the knight prevents White from playing e4, because actually that pawn, if it played to e4, could be easily captured by the knight, and the knight could not recapture because of the pin. He could not expose himself to a check with the bishop. All right, so that's one good move to stop the pawn from playing to e4. Another good move to stop the pawn to going to e4 is d5, which actually contests control of that square e4. So, but of these two good moves, and by the way, if these are the most common replies in this position against knight c3, surprisingly, Duchamp did not play either one of them.
What he made an unusual move here, didn't he?
Yes, he did. The unusual move he played here was d6. So on his third move, he's playing d6. Now, what do you think of this move, Paul?
It doesn't seem like a very good move. It blocks the f8 bishop in.
You're right.
And restricts movement for Black.
It does. And now Black actually has his two bishops are now basically restricted to only these squares. Okay, so actually it actually limits the range of these bishops. Okay, so how does White respond to this?
That move actually helps White, because White can now push the e4 pawn.
Which he did.
Gaining control of the center.
So that's what Koltanowski did. On his fourth move, he played e4. Why not? He now actually has three pawns in the center, controls the center, and it's good to put pawns in the center at the beginning of the game.
It is. It gives you control of the center.
Which is good.
Which is very positive, yes.
Okay. So, it is Black's move here, Duchamp's move here, and what's he going to do? Well, he could play bishop e7, That's a possibility, so that actually he could castle on the next move. That's a good move. That seems to me a plausible move. But he could also play bishop d7. That's the only square that bishop can go to. But he chooses, the move he chooses is b6. Now what does that signal by playing b6?
Looks like now he can fee and ketto the other bishop to
Yes.
b7.
By playing the bishop, his plan is to put the bishop on b7 and occupy this long white diagonal. Okay, so b6 looks like he wants to develop that bishop to b7. Okay, so it's white's move, and it's actually his fifth move coming up. Koltanowski, what are some good choices for white here?
Some solid possibilities for white include the bishop to g5.
That looks very good. That pins the knight. Okay, that looks like very good. Anything else?
Another possibility is knight to f3.
Good
solid developing moves.
Yep, very good. Anything else?
White could also choose to push f4. An interesting move. The move that was played in the game.
It was. So this is actually what Koltanowski played actually on his fifth move. All right, so it's now black's turn. Black again is going to carry out his plan. His plan was to place this bishop, to fianchetto this bishop along the diagonal. So he plays bishop b7 on the fifth move. Now what is black threatening?
Black's now threatening the e4 pawn because he has both the knight and the bishop focused on it. White only has the knight protecting. All
right, so the knight and the bishop, this is attacked twice. It's only defended once. So that means that white has to do something about either defending that pawn or doing something else. What does he choose to do?
White now chooses to defend the pawn.
And how does he do that?
With the bishop to d3.
Okay, so he plays bishop d3. Good developing move, a good defensive move. So that's the most logical move. All right, so now it's black's move again. Again, he can still, if he wishes to castle in two moves, can play bishop e7 and castle, but he chooses not to. You know, it's almost like he's playing a game of cat and mouse. He's saying to white, you know, I'm going to hold back, and you advance, and I want to see what you're going to do before I even respond. So what he does is he plays his knight on b8 to d7. Now you realize there are two knights that can go to d7, so we would have to call that knight b, we would write the notation, n for knight, b, d7. And we have to indicate, we can't say knight d7.
Because the other knight could also
so we have to
there.
say knight b, d7. All right, so he develops the knight here, and now it's white's move, is actually his seventh move coming up. So what can actually white do here? What can actually Koltanowski do?
White could develop the bishop to d2 or e3.
Yes. Any other good? These are developing moves. Any
developing
other
moves?
Any other moves?
Knight to f3.
And
probably
that was
the most sound developing move at this point.
And that's the move that was played. Koltanowski is playing actually a logical developing move, knight f3. Now he's ready to castle on the next move. And you see how black actually held off castling. You know, where he could have actually castled moves ago, he chose not to. Now he's allowing white to castle early.
Seems to me right now white has a stronger position.
White does have the superior position. He has control of the center. He's ready to castle, get his king into safety. It's always good to castle in chess, isn't it?
It is. It protects the king.
Yes.
There can be some circumstances where it could be dangerous.
Okay. All right, so he played knight f3, and it's now black's turn. So, once again, if he wishes to castle in two moves, he can play bishop e7. I harp on this theme, but you see Duchamp holds back and plays e5. So he plays e5 in this position. All right, what does this move do now?
This move forces white to make a response. I mean, there are two pawns, which are both defended currently.
I see that this pawn on e5 is attacking two pawns.
It is.
The F pawn on f4 and also the pawn on d4. But I see that both these pawns are defended adequately. This pawn on f4 is defended by the bishop on c1, and this pawn on d4 is adequately defended by the knight on f3. All right, so it's Koltanowski's move. It's his eighth move coming up. What can he do, or what should he do?
White can just take the pawn here.
You mean F takes
F takes
E5. Okay, that's a possibility.
That would lead to various exchanges.
Right. It also, by F takes E5, like this, would allow this bishop now to come out and also pin this knight. So that looks like a good move. But in the game, what Koltanowski played was D5.
D5.
So he pushes the pawn.
Blocks the white bishop.
Yeah, and he actually sets up a wall here. Look at that, for example. Now he actually renders this bishop less effective because he actually builds up a barrier. Okay, so he plays D5. So now it's Duchamp's move. And after D5, he plays a move where he wants to develop this bishop, but he doesn't want to bring it here. He plays G6. And the idea of when you play G6 is to actually to play the bishop to G7, putting this bishop along this long diagonal. This is I guess would be, if he does that, which looks like he's going to do it, is going to be a double fianchetto, which is actually, which could be very effective. But again, he's restricted. Black actually is restricted in his play here. All right, so he plays G6. It is now White's move. Now, what's a logical move now for White in this position?
Castling seems to be the soundest move.
And that's exactly what White did. But he's playing the most logical moves. In fact, there's no better move than that. Okay, so what does Black do here? Black could, again, carry out the bishop G7. That's possible. That's a possibility. But instead, he first plays E takes F4. So E takes F4.
That seems like a solid move because then it doesn't allow White to push that pawn.
Right, right. I mean, as far as the
side issues.
Okay, all right. So now, how does White respond to this?
Taking with the bishop seems like the best move, which
And he
was
did.
played in the game.
In the game, he did play bishop takes F4. Okay. All right. So Black now is going to continue with his plan, and he plays bishop G7. So this is the move he played. This was his 10th move, and he's ready to castle the next move, if he so chooses. But it's White's move now. Now the question is, what does Koltanowski do on his next move? This is actually his 11th move coming up. What can he do?
White can push the queen forward to D2.
Now, if the queen goes to D2, what is the purpose of doing that? Is there a plan?
The purpose would be then to move the bishop down to H6. Aha! Trying to get that bishop off the square.
And eliminating this bishop, which actually would render this position weaker. There would be if this bishop came off, there was an exchange, this is actually would create a hole, which would not be good for Black to have. So the bishop, so the queen D2 actually threatens to bring the bishop here. It also allows the rooks to be, now the rooks are connected. So this rook on A1 could come over to E1, and
bishop, I believe,
is on this, right? It's on F4. Here. So yes, so it threatens bishop H6. That's a plan. Also, rook A E1 is also another plan. All right. So, but what he did instead was play E5. This is White's move. Instead of playing queen D2, that would have been a good move, by the way. Queen D2. He plays E5 first. All right. So now, what do we see? White threatening here.
This now threatens the knight.
Threatens this knight on F6, also threatens the pawn on D6, which is only defended once. Again, the bishop and the pawn are attacking this twice. So what Koltanowski play, I should say Duchamp play, he's Black here, he plays E takes D5. So that was played in the game, E takes D5. Now, Black is now attacking White's bishop on F4. So, what are White's choices here?
Well, White could take back with the bishop. However, then Black could then take back with the knight. And bishops are valued a little bit higher than knights.
Aha. So White should actually try to preserve his bishop. If there's a trade, he would actually rather trade a knight for a knight than rather give up a bishop for a knight.
Exactly.
Although they are equal, they're supposedly equal in value as far as a bishop and a knight would be worth 3 pawns, 3 points. But actually, bishops tend to be a little bit stronger than the knights. So what he did in the game was he played knight takes E5.
In case of the trade.
Okay. All right, so after knight takes E5, it's actually Duchamp's 12th move coming up, and he finally castles. It took him a dozen moves, but finally he castles in the position. Okay. Now you see, he is still restricted, even though he's safe here. He's got his king in a safe place. But you see how this bishop here along the side is ineffective. And actually, white actually has more space here, controls more squares. All right, so it's white's move here. Black has just castled, so it's now Koltanowski's move, 13th move coming up. And this is actually a fateful move, by the way. 13 being an unlucky number to a lot of us. Well, what actually Koltanowski could have done, he could actually have taken the knight on e5, could have taken this knight on d7. Mm-hmm. This was a possibility. He could take here, yeah. Or, for that matter, he could actually, if he wanted to, if he didn't want to trade, just retreat, bring the knight back to f3.
He could. He could even move the rook over to e1, protecting.
Yeah.
However, he probably wants to leave it on that.
There. But now he makes a mistake. This is the turning point in the game. White actually is winning this game, positionally. Mm-hmm. But he now makes a fatal mistake. On the surface of it, doesn't look like a mistake, but he plays queen d2. So let's play queen d2.
So now white does the queen to d2.
Okay, now he plays. Now, which actually allows this rook now, the rooks to be connected, bringing the rook over. But what white overlooked here is that he is now going to lose a pawn as a result of playing the queen to d2. And what Duchamp played in this position, he played this knight on f6. He played knight takes d5. So this is what he played. And what does he threaten by doing that? He just took a pawn. He just won a pawn here. And in the process, what's he threatening?
This threatens this knight.
We have a double attack. This knight, by taking on d5, exposes this bishop to attack this knight for a second time. Mm-hmm. All right, so what does white do against this? He has choices here, right?
White could continue by taking the knight on d7.
Okay, you mean yes? It could yeah.
Or white could take
here
the knight on d5.
But what happens is he doesn't want to lose these two pieces, you know, to this little combination here. So what he does is he does play. Yes, in the game, what Koltanowski played on his 14th move was knight takes d7. Knight takes d7. All right, so it's Duchamp's move. Now, what does Duchamp do? Does he take queen takes d7? He could. Does he have something stronger? Well, he does have something stronger. Mm-hmm. What he plays here is knight takes f4, his 14th move. So he takes knight takes f4. Now
this creates some issues for white now.
Right, exactly. All right, so now it's Koltanowski's move. And again, by the way, look at this knight is under attack, okay? And so what does he do here? Now, actually, this queen could take this. Of course, if the queen took this, he still loses this knight. Exactly. So what Koltanowski did in the game says, you know what, how do we stand here? I'm down a pawn. We traded here. I've lost a pawn. But I am going to gain
exactly.
a rook.
White sees an opportunity here.
And this is called winning the exchange. Anytime you actually take a minor piece, like a bishop and knight, and you win a rook, that's called winning the exchange, because a rook is worth like 5 pawns, where the knight is worth 3. So this is a material advantage, but positionally it's bad. Because what black did in response to this, black didn't take this knight back. This knight, by the way, is not getting out. This knight now is trapped here because the knight cannot get out here without giving itself out. You know, it had to sacrifice itself to try to escape.
So black continued.
Okay, what black played now is a move which forced Koltanowski to resign immediately. And the move he played here was bishop d4 check. Now the question I put to you on bishop d4 check, attacking the king, is why did Koltanowski resign here?
Well, white has a couple options, but they all ultimately lead to bad things.
He could move the king.
Move the king.
Yeah, there's when you put your opponent into check, when you attack the king, how many ways are there to get out of check? Are there more than one way?
You can either move the king,
yes,
or you can block the piece that's checking the king, or you can take the piece if you have the opportunity.
Right, if you could take, but here is a case where you can't take the piece, so he's limited to 2 choices. He either moves the king, but if he moves the king, he's going to lose his queen. Because actually, yes, the bishop would take on g7, and actually this bishop g7, the king can't move back because the bishop. So that means the queen would have to give herself up to save the stop checkmate. So moving the king to h1 would lose the queen. So in this position, the only other option that white would have, and Koltanowski chose not to go through this,
push the rook to
he could go right there.
block the check.
Okay, but if he goes to the block here, what can black do here? Black has choices here. Of course, actually, he could actually play queen g5. Now, what does queen g5 threaten?
This threatens checkmate because if the queen takes g2, it's guarded by the bishop, and the rook cannot take because it's currently pinned to the king.
You mean, okay, so actually the threat is actually take down here with the check?
Exactly.
Okay. But what actually, black actually has also another good, strong move is knight takes d3. And now he has a double attack on this rook, which is pinned, and he's threatening to win that. But the question is, why cannot white take queen takes d3? If he takes queen takes d3, how does black respond?
Black would quickly respond with bishop takes the rook check, leaving the queen open.
So had this check, if the king takes back, he loses his queen. All right, so you can see why Koltanowski resigned. He didn't want to face blocking the check actually with rook f2. So you can see that Duchamp actually surprised his stronger opponent. Koltanowski was definitely a stronger player back in the late 1920s. And Duchamp was actually a very colorful person. If anybody would go on to Google, Google the name Marcel Duchamp, there would come hundreds and hundreds of pages on his career, his artwork. We probably have seen some of it. On the monitor right now is actually a picture of Duchamp later in his career. You know, he came to this country. He actually lived in New York City. He became a naturalized American citizen in 1955. He did exhibitions in this country. A lot of his artwork is found in the Philadelphia Museum of Art.
Really?
So if you want to see some of his famous paintings, abstract paintings, Philadelphia is the place to go. I'm going to relate one story before we sign off. Duchamp actually married rather late. Actually, in 1927, he had to be like 40 years old. He married a woman. Her first name was Lydie, and they got married. And that is, it was in 1927. It was June 1927 they got married, and he spent most of his time during that after the marriage playing chess. You know, his free time was spent, for example, studying, going over chess problems, going over chess endings, openings at night. So he didn't spend too much time with his wife. This is his new bride. You know, he marries in 1927. So what happened was his wife did not enjoy the fact that he was spending all this time with chess. So one night, in desperate retaliation, she got up when he was asleep and went and glued his chess pieces to his chessboard. So you can imagine actually how he reacted the day after when he found out.
Too happy.
He wasn't too happy. Needless to say, they were divorced 3 months later. So you see that you do not tamper with a chess player, and you don't glue pieces to a chessboard, because that certainly would end the marriage, rather quickly.
So he had the opportunity to play as much chess as he wanted.
Oh yes, exactly, yes. And he loved chess. He was obsessed by chess. And again, he was a very colorful figure in the world of art. Again, he was a founder, one of the pioneers actually in the Dada movement. He was a Dadaist. And these were people who actually rejected conventional art forms and actually created these abstract forms. So again, I want to thank actually my guest, Paul Giovino, for analyzing this game against George Koltanowski today.
Thank you for having me here, George.
Well, it was a pleasure, and I hope to see you again, actually, as a co-host on the program. I think we learned a lot about Marcel Duchamp and his
I think so. A very interesting game.
It was a very interesting game. And I hope you all join us next time when we present another interesting game by a celebrity, either from the art world or some other world that we'll present on chess.